Yo, 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 what is going on, AoEM Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. And today, I thought it would be cool to go through Kingdom 42, where the Empire, the Eternal Empire project, has landed. If you recall, they ended up having over 2,000 players on their Discord, probably somewhere between 600 and 800 people, I would imagine, at minimum, ended up actually jumping or starting day one with them. And we're going to just talk a little bit about how the Zone 1 is playing out, given that Zone 2 just opened. There are some alliances that are going up against their group of alliances, and I want to talk about just kind of what the outlook and the overview is in the kingdom. How can this impact potential things like civil war in a kingdom, especially when there is no KVK right now in a game? And what is the plan? What are you really trying to accomplish, along with how are you going to keep the kingdom active, alive, sustained, reducing the amount of player drop-off that happens? There's really a lot to get to, and I'm going to show you some screenshots from some of the people from VIQ, their leadership, and also from EE to kind of give us a little bit of lay of the land. So as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So the first thing is, let's start with what's actually happening. So the Eternal Empire project basically had planned to land in these 5 Zone 1s from Nilos, Olympia, Gaul, Kiono, and Eastland, leaving Tanir kind of open. At that point, I believe it was Tanir. Maybe it was Eastland, but we'll just basically 1 out of 5. And the idea being is that they wanted to try and go into at least all 6, I would imagine, if they would have been able to probably get 6 alliances, trying to have 1 alliance in each. Now, I am very much of the opinion that I like to do, when I do my big mega projects, I like to always start off with whatever the number of alliances based on the number of Zone 1s. Unless that number is 3 or less, then that's a little bit different. Maybe 4 or less, probably like 3 to 4 or less, right? If there's only 3 to 4 Zone 1s, then I'll probably double up on the amount of alliances that I'll start with, just so you have a little bit more of a buddy system, especially because kingdoms do typically get populated with a decent amount of players going in, but they opted for 1 of each based on where they were and trying to hit their timeline goals as well. So from here, we ended up seeing a number of alliances that popped up in Eastland and then in Tanir. Now, if we end up zooming in here, if I may, if this... Oh, is it lag? Are we... Okay, there we go. I was like, what is going on there? So let's go into the rankings. And if we look at the alliances, we can see you got HE, they're 500 and almost 50 mil. VIQ or VIQ is at 457, and then you got GG, EE, and then OUO at 278. Now, the alliances that are basically fighting against the Eternal Empire here is VIQ, VIQ, and then also I think it's HIQ. Yeah. So here, right? So it's basically number 2 and number 11. So you got 1 at 139, and then you got 1 at 457. Now, if we look at the power for the boards here, you can see Burgle's top player. We have number 2 is VIQ Genius at 35. I actually think this is my boy Junie. I think it is, if I'm remembering the name I just looked at, who I met during Call of Dragons in Kingdom 2. And maybe he's been playing a little bit before then too as well. But he's here at number 2. Then it's Dalog HE, a 3rd from VIQ, right? So you have, just looking at the top 6, it's 3 and 3 apiece, right? You look at top 8, it's 4 and 4. And then it goes, you could see these two right now, it's like 6 to 4 here. I think OUO is just kind of allies, they're just friendly. So then it's 5 to 4, 7 to 4, 8 to 4, 8 to 5. And you can kind of see, right, how it's going at that point. Right, a little bit more in favor. Again, we could probably look all the way down if we really wanted to. I'm sure the numbers are probably somewhat close-ish, but might maybe dip off as we get closer. I almost wonder how deep this goes. Like, can you see past top 100, or is it, oh, cool. Can you see past top 200, or does it stop at 2? That's pretty standard. Wow, they even let you go past 200? Dude, Call of Dragons needs to take some tips from this. Well, okay, so they'll actually show, okay, cool, that's pretty dope. They let you go to a top 300. That's nice. And I say that because oftentimes when you're thinking about doing things like KVK, and we'll maybe touch on that later, is that in games, often you'll usually have the kingdom powers that are sum totals of the top 300 players. So they just basically add the powers together, and then that's what they would get you as a kingdom power. And sometimes those can range between, 20 billion, 16 billion, 22, 23 billion. It just depends on how much power really scales with the players, and if the way the power scales is similar to Call of Dragons and Rise of Kingdoms, which is very similar, and if that's the case, or if it's more like Infinity Kingdom, where Infinity Kingdom is a little bit lower, meaning that like players that are at like 1 billion power or 2 billion power would be considered kind of where you would be at if you're 100 million, as an example, right? Just to kind of broadly explain. However, who is actually fighting who and what's happening? So let's show you that first, off of some screenshots, if we may. So the first one here is a screenshot where HMP's Ant was kind of to give me an answer here. So I kind of asked like where everyone stacked up against. So they said after a 4-sided attack, HE, IE, AE, EE against VIQ, HIQ, we took the approach of merged 2-sided attacks, wiping out VIQ and HIQ current strongholds, forcing them to rebuild on opposite side in the corner of Eastland within the last 24 hours. Now, I did see that VIQ was rebuilding closer to, I think, the Zone 2 pass going in, and it looks like now they are in. We'll show that in a moment. GMP was fighting their own battle in Tanir, eventually winning that as well. Currently, there is no fighting. And then I had asked, right, is there an attempt for diplomacy? Since the beginning of the server, VIQ, HIQ teamed against IE, winning most trades until level 1 pass opened, allowing reinforcements to their aid. And I believe that's the cross zone ones, or the adjacent zone ones. From my understanding, the Chinese VIQ, HIQ had zero intentions on peaceful way of working together towards our server goal of KVK. They haven't allowed IE to farm any RSS nodes, progress territory from the constant attacks leading... Oh, sorry, let me raise it up a little bit. Oh, yeah, you might not be able to see that. Let's do this. From the constant attacks leading to IE Alliance Tech RSS being disrupted, leading to IE now merging into GMP HMP to allow us to progress more. So if we go and we take a look at the map, how that looks here is we have the two alliances here. So you have HIQ in blue, and then I believe in red, this is VIQ. And then purple is another, I think HIQ another. I think that's Kit, someone else there. But then you have the other alliances that are coming in from here, right? So it's QUQ. I believe this is OZO, and I think this one is OUO. So they're kind of friendly. I guess they're kind of neutral in this case. They're not necessarily against anyone or for anyone at this point. Just hoping to kind of advance and work their way in the kingdom. So now I had actually reached out to a number of the VIQ peeps, and I'm going to show you some of those screenshots here as well. Just kind of asking them what's the lay of the land here, and then I'm going to talk about what are next steps here in the kingdom, given that, one, there's no KVK that's been announced, and then two, what is really the game plan overall in essentially this home kingdom. So let's show you that now. If we go through, and I'll show you the first one here. So this is the VIQ lead. So I had reached out to the lead and just said, hey, I'm a content creator. Again, I didn't know if this was everyone. This is just what had been told to me. But again, from what we stated, I says, hi, we're just having some fun here. Another screenshot. We are planning to stay here, so it doesn't look like they're planning to leave. This server will be the strongest server. Damn, those are hard claps. And then I said, okay, well, I see, did anyone from the Eternal Empire Alliances or their family reach out to you to conduct diplomacy with VIC or not yet? Answer was, yeah, they are in contact with us already. So I think that's a great step, is that it shows that there's some initiative being taken on the EE side of, okay, we need to reach out and just be in communication to some degree, whether that's them just telling us to kick rocks because they're going to fight all day long, if that's us trying to kind of come to an agreement for the betterment of the kingdom, whatever it may be. Because I'll tell you right now, the worst thing that really could happen in this kingdom, just like in any kingdom, is if you just have this all-out civil war where anyone and everyone is getting attacked. Now, in most cases, that usually isn't the typical extreme approach that we often see. Usually, it's whichever alliances and or players are actively fighting against others is typically who anyone would target if they're trying to kind of come out as top dog. So an example would be is that the number one alliance probably wouldn't go and attack, like if it's number one versus number two, they're probably not going to go and attack number 7, 8, 9, right? Necessarily, unless those alliances are also allied with VIC or opposite. So VIC and VIC HIQ and the EE Fam Alliances probably wouldn't go and attack OUO as an example, right? Because they've kind of come out and said, we're just kind of neutral. We're not really doing, like, that's how you would probably approach that. Unless maybe some territory needed to be removed, or maybe they were blocking pathing for some reason that maybe it was like from one of them to get to the other one that they could go and attack. I mean, there are some asterisks here. Okay, what's the next one? So next one we have here is the VIC leader saying, but we want to fight at this moment. If not, then this server is boring. We'll touch on that in a moment. And become a dead server. We fight, we have fun, then we go together for KVK. So this is nice to hear, because essentially what the VIQ leader is alluding to is that we're not just going to burn everything and anything and everyone in the kingdom. We understand some of the value of KVK in whatever degree and capacity that may be for the VIQ lead and the VIQ players, along with HIQ, etc. There is some understanding here. And so I said, okay, so you do not want to kill all of them off or remove all of their territory. I had just asked that, so I don't know if I'll probably get an answer back. We'll maybe check near the end of the video. But the thing I want to touch on here with the whole thing about this server being boring is, let me just be very clear here. For those of you who maybe haven't played Kingdom Builders for a while, very much understand that even if you are not fighting 24/7 in some kind of aggressive Civil War-ish play, it doesn't mean that the kingdom is going to be boring. You can do things like war games where you organize PvP events between, whether those are free-for-alls within a particular zone, if it's one alliance versus another alliance, if it's 10v10, 20v20, 30v30, if it's two alliances versus two alliances, you can kind of do whatever you want. So, this kind of idea when I hear people talk about in Kingdom Builders that, oh, well, if we don't fight, it's going to be boring. Keep in mind, there's a very big difference between doing organized fighting and then lawless fighting. And what we're talking about is doing organized fighting. Lawless fighting, for the most part, doesn't really get you the kind of quality education, knowledge, and experience that you would probably think. Sure, it's mostly for like the big people to pwn on the noobs, right? It's a bullying tactic that it typically happens in most cases for how it's looked at, and it's kind of frowned upon to a degree as well. So, okay, now let's go back. I think there's a few more that we can look at here. So we have another one here. This is from my boy Junie, where I had reached out and he's like, hey, hi, brother, I owe you an interview. I promised you one when he was playing COD. He did. So this was something I actually wanted to interview Junie because he was the #1 player at the time back in Kingdom 2 for a period, and I was actually hoping. So really nice to see him playing here. I had asked another person about this. They said, yeah, they've been fighting since the beginning of the server, another VIQ member. And I said, oh, so you're saying they've been fighting against your alliance from the start of the kingdom in Zone 1 before the pass opened? Yes, exactly. So, again, what is going to happen here? I think, best case scenario, I am such a fan of international kingdoms. I think that if you are able, because like with anything, if the aim is let's prep for KVK, the goal should always be, how are we going to get the most amount of time zone coverage for activity in the kingdom? Activity is king, right? And then it's really power when you're talking about having big players to do things like rallies, garrisons, etc. Kind of be some open field generals and leads that can kind of boost morale. There's value there. But at the end of the day, activity really is king. And this is where, if you're able to build up an international kingdom, which some kingdoms in Rise of Kingdoms, some in Call of Dragons, and other kingdom builders as well, for those that attempt or try to achieve these, really they put themselves in a fantastic position to be, I feel, have a high percentage chance of being successful in each KVK season, depending on how Age of Empires Mobile may do it, where they're only building themselves up to be that much better, right, than potentially other kingdoms who are not taking this kind of international approach. So, my recommendation usually, as always, is, try to make it work as the best you can. And oftentimes that really comes from having good diplomacy, whether that's someone who is a translator, someone that's on your team from the EE side that maybe speaks Chinese, Korean, Japanese, etc., right? I think they are a Chinese alliance from what someone had mentioned. And so if that's the case, maybe being able to have someone that speaks the language but also understands where you're coming from. Otherwise, it just requires a lot of back and forth, like a lot of time and effort and energy to spend if you're basically texting going from one person to the other and then you're using the translator. With that in mind, I think the absolute worst thing that can happen here is if it does end up turning out to be a full civil war where there is no kind of agreement or pact or understanding that can be made, where they're just going to fight it out nonstop. Because if that happens, then it could end up being where one side wants more than the other. And that could be something as simple as, okay, they fight it all off in Kingsland, and then eventually they get pushed out of Zone 3. Maybe they then get pushed out of one of the Zone 2s here for the West, North, or East Kingsland, and then maybe they're getting attacked in Zone 1. So you know, that I think is kind of the worst case scenario, because that only would just leads to a lot of players quitting and not wanting to enjoy their playing time there. And this is home kingdom. There's no KVK. So at this point in time, there's nothing to really look forward to. Sure. Is it important to sustain and to have high morale and to get the most amount of engagement that you can within the kingdom? Absolutely. But there are better and worse ways, or bad ways, I guess you could say, that you would basically accomplish that. And having this approach where you're just going to kind of do this lawless PvP just really isn't the way to go about it. Now, if they've come together and maybe they've had conversations that said something like, hey, let's just fight it out all the way up until Zone 3, and then whoever captures the final building, right, we'll just say, okay, we're done, let's work together, and then we'll start working on things like setting up war games and fun PvP events to do. Maybe they'll time it out with when MGE is happening for the kill event, which is usually the last stage in that particular event. And then you can organize things like maybe we'll do free-for-all in Zone 3. Maybe we'll do some 1v1 alliance fighting, or we'll do some 30 versus 30 alliance fighting, right? There's things that you can do where you can still enjoy the PvP, but you can hopefully educate players and they'll learn from it, where you can go in with a game plan and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, or let's test out these pairings against these pairings, and let's test out these tactics for these tactics. Maybe you'll do some rally and garrison testing, where maybe that's one of your war games, where it's like you'll work on rallying and they'll work on defending, and then you swap. You can really be creative with your approaches on how to keep a home kingdom fun. And again, I've only really scratched the surface. There's a lot more that you can really do. I'm just kind of mentioning some highlighted points. However, like I said, we'll see how the kingdom ends up developing. I mean, again, VIQ is growing in power. I did see them at one point be stronger than the top alliance from EE, but obviously now they've retaken that. See, the last thing I'll mention here is that one of the benefits that VIQ has is that they could probably just funnel everyone into one alliance and then just try and grow and potentially be stronger than the first. And the challenge is that that can sometimes force the other side, in this case EE, to maybe have to consider merging. Now, I've had this happen in a couple kingdoms that I've done projects in. And in most of them, I usually take this approach where we just don't really care if they end up kind of bulking up and basically doing this big mega alliance. Because the thing is that if they decide to start attacking everyone, then, you know, we can easily just leave, or we can, I mean, not to say that we're going to stop playing, but basically we're not going to engage. That's usually the easiest way to kind of, you're kind of killing them with kindness, right? So you either say, well, look, we'll just migrate out whenever we want to, or we just won't attack you, right? Like, we're not going to give you the day. So if you just want to sit there and go around bullying people, like, it just gets boring after a while. I can tell you, I've seen this happen in a number of kingdoms where some alliances have taken this approach, and people just kind of, their energy dies out, because why are you just going to want to sit there and go around attacking people when they're not actually attacking you or fighting you back? For them, for the people that are doing that, right, they kind of view it usually more as like, oh, this is just a war game, but you're not giving me any war, right? It's kind of one of the ways to like let the wind out of the sails. And again, those are just to kind of go over a couple things, but we'll see how it plays out here in 42. I'd love to hear from any of you that are playing in the kingdom. How have things been happening so far? Are you optimistic? Do you think that there's a little bit more light at the end of the tunnel? Is this kind of like a real, we're just going to fight to the death and someone's going to have to end up getting, you know, pushed out to Zone 1, we're going to remove all territory? Or no, you know what, we're just going to fight and then hopefully be able to sing Kumbaya on the end before KVK comes, whenever that may be. Let me know. That's it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.